Finished training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome to How We're the Podcast. It's Martin here, and today you join us for another episode of On This Week, where we take a look through some of the highlights and not so highlights of things that have happened on this week in the history of Sunderland AFC. And we have a couple of people to join us today. We have, first up, Chris Wynn. How are you, Chris?
Hello, mate. Well, as I was telling you before we started recording, it is the season where the kids come home, the little cherubs pick all of their bugs at school, bring them home, and then slobber all over you, and then you're feeling ill for a week, and they're running around with bundles of energy. And so it is the season, mate.
It is. As Ian Dowie would say, their bounce back ability is pretty good, isn't it? Whereas the older you get, ours isn't, because I've had exactly the same thing this week.
Yeah. Well, good isn't the word I would use. Bloody annoying is the way I would describe it.
Well, they're still small enough you can trip them up accidentally playing football on purpose.
two foot them more like.
Also joining us this week is Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Martin, mate. You okay? Well, I know for a fact you're not okay. You're struggling with these bugs.
No, it's all relative, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely fine apart from that. Thank you. And also potentially joining us today is Kelvin, who's currently in a fierce battle with BT internet services to get online from some remote place he's in this week. So Kelvin may join us later on.
Just quickly say it, by the way, Martin, the response we got last week to talking about Rouse was absolutely fantastic. Everybody who I've spoken to absolutely loved that. Just thought I wanted to mention that because for a start I loved it and learned a lot about it. But yeah, I thought the response from that, I thought everybody actually took something from it. I mean, we had someone saying it should be made into a Netflix film and all that sort of stuff with the story that we told.
No, it's an interesting tale, isn't it? Yes, I think a lot worse stories and a lot poorer stories have been made in Netflix films. So, so there's always a good chance, isn't it? We're going to start with the quiz question from last week. Actually, Andrew, do you want to give a few reminders of the quiz question that we left people with? Because then we can jump straight into October the 13th.
Of course. Before I do that, can I just recommend that Kelvin gets one of those NORDVPNs you two lads have been trying to flog over recent weeks. He's obviously not been listening to your brilliant adverts for them.
He hasn't. It might help, mightn't it?
It is a brilliant offer, to be fair, Andrew. I'm still that salesman. Don't worry about that.
Exactly. Yes. Anyway, quiz question. Yeah, we asked which club.
I've actually gone red. You bringing that up?
No, I genuinely enjoyed it, but I knew that you two had a bit of a laugh putting them together. So anyway, I'm not a spokesman for NORD VPN. I'm not on their
I'm going to stop you there, Andrew, because NordVPN offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. You get 4 months absolutely free. All you need to do is go to nordvpn.com/Hawaii to get your offer. They've got 8,000 servers in 126 countries, and you can access local content wherever you want it.
See, Martin, Andrew, we're professionals. We've got the script to hand whenever we feel the need.
Smooth.
Sorry, Andrew.
And
quiz question.
That's quite all right. And that's NORD, you say. NORD. Is that right? Yeah.
That is absolutely correct.
Aye. Right. Yes.
At least you've been listening. You've been listening. That's good.
I did start that, and I apologise. We've got away from the matter in hand, which I think was the quiz question. Which club legend was born in Silksworth on the 13th of October? And the answer was, of course, Bobby Gurney. Now, strictly speaking, you think of Gurney as a hometown hero, although technically the village of Silksworth didn't become part of Sunderland until the 1960s. But we'll still take Gurney, I think, as a local lad. We'll allow him in that fine tradition of Sunderland-born heroes who wore the shirt for the club. Are you not having that, Chris? Am I being a bit tight, am I?
Yeah. I'm just thinking you're going to have all the Silksworth locals outside your house with pitchforks and that if they find out where you live, saying they're not really from Sunderland. Just disgraceful slander.
I clearly said before the 60s, Chris, trying to get me into bother here. And I know plenty of lads from Silksworth who are more than keen to refer to the place as the village still. So hopefully I avoid the furious hordes chasing after us. Gurney himself, if I may speak highly of him and get myself back ingratiated with the likes of the lads from Silky, was a real icon for us. I mean, joint top scorer when we won the title. He scored in the final when we first won the FA Cup. I mean, you can't ask for much more from a lad playing for the team he supported as a kid to do that. I mean, that's a hell of an achievement from him, isn't it?
Some going.
Yeah. And something I particularly liked about Gurney was when he retired from playing, he was living in kind of the East Harrington area. I don't know if you lads know where the Board-In pub is. It's a very well-known pub in Sunderland.
Yeah.
He lived in that area near to the Board-In, which at the time of the 1973 FA Cup final, Ian Porterfield also lived nearby. So you've got two Sunderland goal scorers in cup finals living in the same suburb. And a lot of the homecoming footage from 1973 around the Board-In area was actually taken by Bobby Gurney. He's a former player, and he had this rudimentary camcorder. He's living in East Harrington. He was on the first FA Cup homecoming parade as a player. And then fast forward to 73, he's out on the streets taking some of the best footage that we still have of the new team coming back into the town, which I just think is an amazing little quirk, and just proves that not only was he a Sunderland player, but he was a Sunderland fan himself. He was thrilled to bits to see that the team had emulated him and lifted the cup again for Sunderland.
That's incredible. I never knew that.
Just give you another little quirk, and I don't know whether you all might have heard this before, but talking about that FA Cup celebrations with the bus, did any of you know who actually designed the bus that the players were on? It went through Sunderland.
The 73 version is this, Chris?
Yeah.
I think you had a really good interview with him, if I'm thinking of the right person. Yeah.
I think you are. Go on then, Andrew.
It was, I better get it right now. It was John Ficklin, wasn't it? Didn't he work for a bus company or something like that?
Yeah, he worked for a bus company, and it was his job to kind of modify the bus for the celebrations and stuff. And then he went on to be kind of vice chairman or whatever his title was in the end. And also he said because he had a role in it, just before the players come on, he snuck on, so he was already on, hiding in the back, and he travelled on the bus.
But
it's funny how all these things kind of intertwine with each other, isn't it?
Aye. three eras, three very distinct eras of Sunderland history there, like you say, of all kind of within a few meters of each other on that famous parade.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
Very good. Now, Kelvin has obviously got online, signed up for his NordVPN subscription because he has joined us. Have you won your battle, Kelvin, or is this a temporary join?
Well, let's see what happens here. The wonders of modern technology.
Excellent. Well, we have just started on October the 13th. Yeah, 1907 was the year that Bobby Gurney was born in Silksworth. 1970, Dick Malone signed from Ayr for 30 grand. 6 years later, Pop Robson was sold back to West Ham for 80,000. He was obviously a player who kept joining and leaving Sunderland. He had 3 spells on Wayside as a player, and he had at least 2 more, I think, as a coach. And he came back as part of the coaching staff, and he was on the books as a scout for a long time as well. 1979, Wes Brown was born in Manchester. He played 87 games for Sunderland and scored 1 goal. 5 years after that, 1984, Sunderland played Norwich City at Roker Park. Howard Gale and Steve Berry got the goals for Sunderland, and future Sunderland manager Steve Bruce was in the Norwich lineup. 2001, a Kevin Phillips goal in front of what was a new record crowd at the Stadium Light, 48,305. Kevin Phillips' goal was a consolation as Manchester United beat us 3-1. That'll still be the record crowd at the Stadium Light, is it?
It's a good question.
Yeah,
I was presuming it is.
Did we not? I seem to think it was a game against Liverpool. Was that maybe in a couple of weeks that followed? And I don't know, maybe they sold a couple of extra away tickets, perhaps. Because you're right, that figure there, Martin, is pretty impressive. It would be hard to beat. But I don't know, there's just something that seems to say to me that we did it against Liverpool somehow.
You are completely correct. So later on that season, the 13th of April, 48,353. So 48 more people were crammed into the Stadium Light a few months later on. You're right.
I don't know how, because when you see the kind of the sold out signs, you don't see any empty seats anywhere. And then the attendance comes out, and then you say, like, there's maybe a difference of 50 or 60 here or there, and you're left scratching your head as to quite how it's happened.
There must be a different way of counting the number of people who were in the ground compared to the last couple of seasons, because some of the attendances were a little bit optimistic, I think, at some points.
Yeah. Well, I had somebody ask, a Manchester United fan asked me the other day about, we got on to talking about Roker Park, and talking about back in the day and what attendances Roker Park could get, and they asked what the record was. Now, in my mind, and I might be one for you, Andrew, I'm not sure, but in my mind, was it the official, the largest attendance at Roker Park? Was it Derby County? And it was like 76,000 or something?
Yeah.
Is that the actual one? Because I know for some of them, they obviously lost count when tour rags like Kelvin kind of burst the doors open and what have you, and everyone flooded in. And actually, they think there was more actually in attendance on that night for that Derby game, don't they?
Yeah, the attendance, it was either a cup replay or a cup. It was certainly an FA Cup tie in the mid-30s, I want to say, which at the time, when you look back, that was a real golden era for us. But I mean, Bobby Gurney, for example, was at his best in that period. And yeah, it was 70. I don't know why I'm trying to pretend. I've looked it up on Google here, lads. It was 75,000 if we want to be exact. But yeah, there was definitely times either side of that where we believe there were higher crowds. That Man United one in the 60s, which is a one we always like to talk about. Like you say, Kelvin was obviously up to no good and knocking down the doors to get into that one, because they reckon tens of thousands of people somehow managed to flood in and get into the ground. But it always fascinates me, the absolute ends of the extreme. Chris, you talk about that game in the 30s when we had 70-odd thousand. There will have been other times in that decade, even when the teams were doing quite well, when we were getting 10 or 12,000. The ground must have looked very different depending on how many people were in, because, yeah, you just can't imagine how they squeezed 70-odd thousand in. But then a couple of weeks later, people must have been rattling around with room to spare, you know?
Yeah, it's always a funny one, that sort of discrepancy in crowds and the way that they sort of jumped around all over the place in those days, isn't it?
Aye. It's a bit. I think you probably these days you've got a better bet of predicting attendances purely because of season ticket holders. You know, it makes it going to a game is a very different decision now. You're not just waking up on the morning and thinking, "Oh, I might go and catch the lads this afternoon." You've got to be quick when those tickets go on sale on the website these days.
You do. We will move on to October the 14th, 1896. Now, this was the first ever player to be transferred from Sunderland to Newcastle. A centre-half called John Auld, or Old. Do you know how that's pronounced, Andrew?
I think it was John Auld.
John Auld.
I believe.
Yeah, so he was the first player to leave Sunderland to go up the road. 1933, Patsy Gallagher scored a hat-trick in a game against Liverpool. We beat them 4-1 at Roker Park. And there was also a goal for a chap called Benny Yorston. So Benny Yorston got the other goal in that game. It was his 28th birthday. And looking at Benny Yorston, he was a 5'5" centre forward. He played a couple of years for us at Roker Park, and he left to join Middlesbrough. I think he had 5 or 6 seasons at the Borough and scored a number of goals for them as well. Talking to people who scored goals for Sunderland, Marco Gabbiadini, a favourite topic of this podcast. And in 1989, this was the day that him and Ricardo were on the same field at the same game for Sunderland, but they weren't actually on the field at the same time. Ricardo coming on to play his only competitive game for Sunderland as a substitute for Marco in a 2-0 defeat at Elland Road. In the year 2000, we had that game at home against Chelsea where we won 1-0 with a Kevin Phillips penalty, but the game was delayed for about 45 minutes. There was a power failure and nobody really knew what was going on. Kevin Kilban and Graham Lasso got sent off for a bit of handbags in front of the East stand. And I remember that day vividly because I had a night out planned in Leeds that night. And I was desperately trying to get back down to Leeds to join in all the lads with the first beer at 7 o'clock, and that did not happen. It was close to 8:30 by the time I got back down the A1.
Just quickly as well, incidentally, it was just after Euro 2000, and it was obviously Kevin Phillips was trying to show what kind of England missed out on by not playing him during those Euros. And it was the same week, I think it was a few days after, Kevin Keegan resigned after the Germany game. And he had that kind of famous interview in the tunnel where, you know, he got all emotional and all that sort of stuff.
Just not big enough for the job, I think, was the line, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm sure he was only 5'8" or something like that. So it kind of made sense. But, yeah, he Didi Hamann goal, that free kick off the wet Wembley turf. The last ever England international, wasn't it, as well, at Wembley?
At the old Wembley, that's right.
And he quit. But yeah, so there was this thing where Keegan got sacked and Kevin Phillips was still banging the goals in. And one of the reasons he got sacked or resigned was because we were so crap at Euro 2000. Maybe if he'd stuck Phillips on a bit more, you never know.
Well, he should have done, shouldn't he? But that's a whole other story, a whole other podcast.
Apologies in advance if I've not got the details correct here. Did it turn out that it was some people doing some works near the stadium, or like metro station, and they cut through a cable? I think that might have been what caused the delay.
It was something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not going to name any companies or utility providers just in case I get the wrong ones. We've already had BT trying to scupper us today with Boot and Kelvin out of the call. So yeah, I'm not going to risk the wrath of upsetting anybody. But yeah, I think it was works nearby that had the knock-on impact on the stadium's supplies, I believe.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. 14th of October in 2006. It was a bit of a miserable day for Roy Keane. We were playing a game at Deepdale against Preston North End. We got beat 4-1, and typically My favourite all-time Sunderland player, Danny Dichio, got a goal for Preston. Dean Whitehead also scored an own goal, and Stan Varga got a goal for us. Now, I think this was Ben Anick's last game for us, because in a few days' time, which we'll come on to later in the podcast, Darren Ward started a game away at Stoke, and I think Darren Ward was pretty much in the team. And then Martin Fulop had a few games as well later on.
Danny Dichio's goal wasn't a penalty. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
It wasn't a penalty. That would be worse, wouldn't it? That would have rubbed insult into injury. Okay, October the 15th, 1932. We've talked about Bobby Gurney already in this episode. Rach Carter made his debut for the club. We played a game at Sheffield Wednesday and were beaten 3-1. But obviously, that was the start of an illustrious career in red and white. 1977. Second half goals from Kevin Arnott and Gary Rowell gave us a 2-0 home win over Millwall. And in 1996, Darren Williams, the best clapper in Sunderland history, was signed from York City for 50 grand, plus a few add-ons for different things. And now here's a bit of a quiz question of sorts for you, right? So 2022, we played Wigan at home, and we beat them 2-1. Elliot Embleton, Dennis Serkin got second half goals for us. Charlie Wycott scored for Wigan in the first half. There were 5 former Sunderland players for Wigan on the field that day. Charlie Wycott's obviously one of them.
Max Power?
Max Power was playing, that's right. Yeah. There was James McLean.
The winger. What was the winger called? Yeah.
Yeah, James McLean. Nathan Broadhead and Ashley Fletcher were also in the Wigan team, which raises a question. What's the maximum, or what's the biggest number of former Sunderland players to line up in one game against us? I reckon that must be close.
Yeah, it will be. Stoke might be in with a shout.
Yeah,
They had a few ex-Sunderland players on the books. And he is one that might be utter nonsense. Maybe Sunderland Albion? Back in the day, I think there was a bit of a split, wasn't there? And some players.
He's been clever here, hasn't he?
Yeah,
it might not even be the case, but just I remember a lot of players kind of were torn between the two.
The other one I'll throw in there.
James Allen and the goalkeeper before Ned Doig were definitely playing for Sunderland Albion.
See, told you, lads. It's not the worst shout I've made on this pod.
It's not bad. I would say in a competitive game.
Fair dues.
The other one I might throw in, and I haven't checked, but potentially there may have been a game against Oxford United in the 90s, because remember they had Martin Gray, David Rush, I think Phil Gray was there at one point, Anton Rogan. It's a potential one to look at, but but it'll do well to beat this Wigan one.
That's quite interesting. When I looked at that game, I was like, I can't remember as many, and they're all former Sunderland players. There's not any future Sunderland players there. It's all former Sunderland players. There might be a few that, if you take future players into account, we top that number, but 5 former players is quite good going. We will move on to October the 16th. Now, 1909, George Holley, England international, scored a hat-trick in our 6-2 home win over Arsenal. 1965, Jimmy Montgomery, who we talked about last week, got injured, and Martin Harvey took over in goal with 7 minutes of a game remaining. We were 3-2 up against Nottingham Forest at home, and that score remained the same. 1976, 16th of October, Bob Stokoe stood down as Sunderland manager after a 1-0 defeat to Aston Villa at home. Now, 1979, here's a bit of an interesting one for you. So we played a friendly against Olympia Asuncion at Roker Park, and we won 5-2. There was a couple of trialists who played for us. One of them was called Horden Palmyra, and the other one was an Argentinian international called Alcides Giordano. Now, both of them played pretty well according to the match reports, and both of them were brought to the club as a result of a scout who Ken Knighton had brought into the club. He was called Oscar Arse at the time. When you look at him now, he and that was Arse, A-R-C-E. It's only one letter away from Arca, but one letter can make all the difference.
So not a brother of Burnt Arse then?
Not Burnt Arse's brother, no, it's
okay.
Different bloodline. But Oscar and his brother had actually spent time in Aston Villa in the late 60s and had been on their books, but hadn't made a first team appearance. Now, Oscar, as I say, when you look at him now, he's called Oscar Fuloni. So he'd obviously had a bit of a name change at some point in his career, or how he's referred to. The interesting thing about this, we brought him in as a scout to obviously tap into that South American market. He'd also been trying to bring a centre forward who had starred for Brazil at the World Cup the year before. So this chap was called Gilberto Alves, and he was due to play in this game as well. And Oscar Arse had set the deal up, and he was due to come play in this trial game and then due to sign. Now, he got stuck in London, and he'd missed his connecting train and didn't get up for the game. Ken Knighton had kind of talked about this chap playing for us and about to sign. Got the hump with Oscar Arse and put all the blame onto him for this lad missing his train. And eventually this scout left the club very shortly afterwards. But he was also at Sheffield United around this time as well. So when you, I think it was Alex Sabella went into Sheffield United, that was a result of this guy. And both Sunderland and Sheffield United were linked with Maradona at this time, and that was due to this chap as well. So it's a really interesting little side story, I guess, in that late 70s history of Sunderland, where these South American players came and looked like they were going to sign, but for one reason or another, they didn't.
When Knighton sacked him, was that scout out on his arse, Martin?
I would say he was.
I didn't know that. I definitely recognised the name. It was good crack, that.
So I think if Andrew hadn't laughed there, Martin would have just carried on.
That did take me a couple of seconds too long.
But the thing is, at this point, isn't it? We talk about us scouting them, which is one thing, getting them on trial or whatever. But for so many years, a lot of these players were linked. But with the work permit rules, we just couldn't get any of these in. And I think you might have mentioned earlier on, because this and from this brilliant writer A. Smithson, who does the On This Days, wrote about this. The start of that season, the Yugoslavia international Bozo Bakatar.
Yeah,
Bakatar, that's it. That was going to be a club record deal, but again, that was a work permit issue. And me and Martin had talked in the past about Brad Friedel. I mean, it was kind of years and years. All these foreign players were linked, and it fell down at the work permit, didn't it?
It did. You had to have an Italian grandparent, as Rob Mason told me and Andrew about Julio back in the day, going through American customs, and when he was asked what part of Italy are you from, he said Buenos Aires.
Or it was like what Jack Charlton used to do for the Irish, and found that that once that had a distant relative who walked a dog once on Irish soil or something like that, and then they became a Republic of Ireland international. But yeah, I mean, Thatcher's Britain, wasn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, he had a pint of Guinness with Jack Charlton, and you were qualified.
Yeah, that was it. Full international.
That's right. 1982, we drew 2-2 away at Man City. Ali McCoist and Mick Buckley got our goals. Dennis Stewart was in the Man City team that day. 2004, we beat Millwall at home with a lovely second half own goal from Kevin Muscat. It was always nice to see him put through his own net. And 2021, Lee Johnson, Sunderland beat Gillingham away 2-1. Aidan O'Brien and Tom Flanagan, two illustrious names from our history, scored the goals, with Elliot Embleton seeing red for a second half challenge. We will take a short break there. We'll be back very soon.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like expecting the leadership of a team captain on the football field, but getting a sea captain. You wouldn't settle for just anything for your team. Shouldn't it be the same for your insurance? So don't settle for just any insurance when you can go with a leader. State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Welcome back to How We're the Podcast. You join us on October the 17th in our latest episode of On This Week. 1936, Sunderland played Middlesbrough at Ayresome Park, and this equalled our highest ever scoring draw. The game ended 5-5. At half-time, we were 4-3 up. 2 goals from Len Duns, Bobby Gurney and Jimmy Connor. Rach Carter got one just after half-time, but Middlesbrough had pegged it back in the game, ended all square. 1966, George Cannell, and you can guess his nickname, can't you? He was a cousin of Jim Baxter, signed from Oldham for 20 grand. And 1970, Dick Malone, we talked about him signing a couple of days earlier. He made his debut against Bristol City in a 1-0 home win.
I saw that game, Dick Malone's debut, and he got injured in the game.
Oh, really?
He was very unlucky. Injured in the game, and it took him a wee while to get back. He wasn't quite firing on all cylinders when he came back. He was a super player, Dick Malone, for us. He famously sold himself to Bob Stokoe again in Ian Porterfield's testimonial when was that? 1978. Stokoe came back and managed the FA Cup team against the current Sunderland team for Ian Porterfield's testimonial, and Dick Malone played. He was playing for Hartlepool at the time, and what a blimmin' game he had! He was the best player on the park, and Stokoe took him to Blackpool right after that.
Yeah,
signed
right.
him for Blackpool. Top lad, Super Dick they called him. Unique dribbling style.
17th of October as well, gents. Some records seem to think that might be the day the club had the meeting. The meeting took place where James Allen and a couple of his teaching colleagues got together and started discussing forming a football team. Now, I know the whole 1879, 1880 debate goes on, and that's perhaps one that we don't want to get into here because that's a big hornet's nest. I certainly know my feelings on it, and I side with the 1879. But just that particular date, the 17th of October, there are some sources which suggest it could be quite important in the most important date, you'd argue, in the club's history.
Can I just ask you why you side with 1879 there, Andrew? No, I'm only kidding. I just wanted to see your face.
That's shocking. And on a personal note, and I can confirm this because he has a birth certificate. My best mate's celebrating his birthday on the 17th of October. So all the best to him. And it would be nice for him if it turned out that the club he supports and's got a season ticket for happened to share a birthday with him. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that matter before I've already got everybody from Silksworth lining up outside the house, thanks to Chris winding them up. I don't want 2 groups of people chasing us.
No, well, again,
I'm sorry, Andrew.
That is a whole other podcast, I think, which we could do one day if we're feeling brave and adventurous. But
there's an army of Coventers heading to your house right now, Andrew. Yeah, just to say about George Cannell, did you know that he played for Juventus, George Cannell?
Wow.
Had you heard that? No. It was Juventus FC in Melbourne lads, but not the more illustrious Italian team. But
we all knew, Kelvin. We all knew that there was going to be a little twist there, or there was going to be a cheeky punchline or something.
Waiting for the punchline.
I thought it was going to lead into some gag about an old lady, but there we go. That's where my mind went.
I never much cared for him. I watched him play and never much cared for him. He was always one of Ian McCall's favourites, and he used to drop Charlie Hurley and try and play him. That was my memory of George Kinnell.
There we go. Not a favourite of Kelvin. 1981, Colin West made his debut in a 2-0 defeat to Tottenham Hotspur. 1987, Sunderland won 2-0 at Blackpool, thanks to 2 goals from John McPhail.
Can I just mention at this point, if anyone has listened to the recent podcast we did with Gary Bennett, I thought it was quite interesting. And John McPhail must have had an inkling and already had a conversation with Dennis Smith, because I don't know if any of you have listened to it, but John McPhail clearly knew he had one over on him, because he went and made a bet with Gary Bennett who would score the most goals in this season. And Gary Bennett didn't know he was on penalties. So McPhail knocked in like 16 goals or something, and Gary Bennett didn't stand a chance.
No, he was very good at penalties that season, McPhail, wasn't he? But yeah, it's if you'd done for insider trading now, wouldn't you? If you made that bet.
And that day, of course, I don't know. Sorry, Martin, if you're going to mention it, Barry Siddle was in goal for Blackpool that day when McPhail got 2 goals. But yeah, just very, very quickly on McPhail, it was bizarre that it was only for that one season, and then suddenly, Hardiman came in, but we never really saw him again. And
well, no, it wasn't, because he'd been brilliant at penalties. He missed his first one in the last home game of the season against Northampton. He'd already scored one. He put one over the bar in the second half. The following season, he started on penalties, and he scored a few, but he also missed a few. So then Marco went on penalties, and Marco wasn't very good at penalties. And one of the ones he did score, he ended up punching Tony Hume of Ipswich in a strange celebration after he sealed his hat-trick. Obviously got sent off and had a 4-match ban for that game. So it was that first season back up, the 88-89 season, was a strange one with penalties, because McPhail had been so consistent the previous season and then wasn't as clinical with them. So Marco and I can't remember if somebody else had to go at them as well. But then when Hardiman came, the reason for that was we needed a new penalty take. So when Hardiman came, I don't think he'd actually taken penalties before at first team level, but in training he'd been putting them away, so he got on them. And he was great at them at the start. And then as we know, towards the end of that season, he had a jitter or two.
That really annoying on this day writer A. Smithson did a bit about Hardiman getting the nod to take penalties. I did that in the summer, so if anybody's got 10 minutes to while away, they can find that out. But how classic Sunderland is that, Martin? We've got a striker who has scored a goal and still manages to get himself sent off in the celebrations. I mean,
it was his hat-trick. It was his hat-trick as well.
Just a crazy, crazy little story, that, but just nothing surprises you with Sunderland history.
But in that, and you lads might be able to tell us more about this, but I mean, I remember watching Marco and think he was brilliant. But it's such a strange, because Marco Gabbiadini had this attitude. He had this kind of, tunnel vision where he was going to score all the goals, and he just had one target, and that was it, to run towards goal and score. Yet penalties, he never seemed a one who was always on them.
Well, one of the things I used to think about Gabbiadini was he was a really instinctive striker. I thought the more time that he had, the more chance there was that he was going to miss.
Yeah, it's a funny one, because I've actually just been watching some clips of Marco in Division 3 today for an On This Day for tomorrow, which is a few days ago now. If you listen to the podcast, so On This Day, I came out on Friday.
As long as that's clear.
Yeah, it's late. So I was watching some of Marco's Division 3 action for an On This Day, which was published on the website on Friday. And it's interesting you say that because there was some very much first time finishes and clinical finishes and all that sort of stuff. But there were a number of them that you had a bit of time to think about, and he was so composed and just took the ball really well. And the game that I wrote about on Friday, the Wigan game at home, when Gates and Gabbiadini both scored in the same game for the first time, he set up Gates's second goal with a lovely little run cut back to Gates, so he could create stuff as well. But penalties, he just wasn't. He wasn't assured in how he took penalties. Whether he tried to keep the goalkeeper guessing or what, I don't know. But I think he scored a couple. He had at least one saved, if not two. But yeah, the Ipswich game will always stand in my mind as being an oddity, I guess. There's not many players who get sent off in the celebration for their hat-trick goal.
Martin, at least you had an excuse for watching footage of Marco Gabbiadini. I'll just do that most nights anyway, just wiping away a single tear, just remembering those special days. And do you know what? We can't go an episode without mentioning Marco Gabbiadini, and genuinely, I do have a couple of lines on Gabbiadini prepared for later on in this episode. So the Marco Gabbiadini corner of this episode is now suddenly doubled up somehow.
You never have too much Marco in an episode. That's my view on things. 1993, we played Middlesbrough away at Ayresome Park, and the stadium announcer played Jailhouse Rock before the game as the teams warmed up in honour of James. Well, as he was called then, he was called James Lawrence at this point, making his first appearance in Sunderland colours.
And just to add to that, Martin, this is the exact game. This is the game that we were talking about last week where I had nightmares with Tyne Tees.
Live on Tyne Tees television. That's right.
Sunday game, got hammered 4-1. Goodman missed a penalty. I mean, this is what nightmares of Tyne Tees television was made of.
I think that was the first game we wore squad numbers in. If I have the...
You're right.
We wore the yellow and black, that beautiful yellow and black shirt and squad numbers. I think they came in for a bit, went back out, and then obviously in more recent times they're a permanent fixture.
It was a really strange thing, wasn't it? Because they introduced them at this point in the season. So we played games in August and September and the start of October, 1 to 11. And then all of a sudden we rock up in bloody squad numbers and you're going, why?
Yeah. I've got a memory of, and that we had strange number 5s. Wasn't Derek Ferguson number 5?
He wore number 5 for us a lot. I'm not sure if that was his squad number or not, but he wore number 5.
Yeah, and then then David Kelly took number 5 or something like that as well.
He did, yeah.
Aye, yeah.
For some reason, I always remember because I used to always want number 5 for the Sunday League team, so that was kind of the number I always wanted. And then when I saw Sunderland, I was like, well, why? I want one of our centre halves. I wanted Bawley or Bennett or Melville or someone like that to have number 5, and it never was. We always had weird number 5.
Well, it was a really strange one because I think with the Ferguson one, Bawley was number 6 out of preference, and Benno was always number 4 out of preference. So number 5 was free for a midfielder. The David Kelly one was just bizarre.
Lads, Ferguson was officially given the number 5 squad number. So
there you go.
Top marks to Chris there. That's a good effort. There's another pod we can do one time. Guess the squad numbers of Sunderland's first squad.
Well, I'll tell you one I will always know, right? Because it was a lottery number. Because the National Lottery started, a year or two after this? Martin Smith, number 22. So number 22 was one of my lottery numbers because Martin Smith was my favourite player in that squad.
Well, Chris might remember this. Obviously, Martin Smith went to our school. He was older than us. And I used to love it in English, when they handed out the textbooks and he would have had his name written in it. I'd be like, oh, yes, I've got Martin Smith's book. But again, a bit like yourself, 22 was always significant to me because that was my tutor group number. So there was me thinking, it's a sign. I'm sat in class 22, which I think was on the bottom floor. It was underneath the science department. There's Martin Smith wearing 22. We both go to the same school. Obviously, in a couple of years' time, I'm going to be playing alongside him for Sunderland in the first team. That's how it was meant to work.
Yeah. Another universe, another sliding doors moment, Andrew. Could have been.
Yeah.
Martin Smith's dad, he always wore number 10, didn't he? Pellier.
Very good. Very good.
Now we'll move on to 2006. Now, I mentioned earlier about Ben Alnwick in that game at Preston. A few days later, we played away at Stoke City, and Darren Ward, who had joined the club. Did he come from Norwich? I think he came from Norwich on a free transfer, didn't he? He joined the club essentially as Alnwick's backup for that season after Niall Quinn hailed Ben Alnwick as the next Jimmy Montgomery. Didn't quite turn out like that. Darren Ward was put into the side by Roy Keane. I thought Darren Ward was a great goalkeeper. We've spoken about him on the pod before. But he made his debut against Stoke. We got beat 2-1. Dwight York scored a goal for us to open the scoring, but we got pegged back in the second half. And on the 17th of October 2009, Bolo Zenden made his debut in the game, but something far more memorable happened because we played against Liverpool and Darren Bent scored with the aid of a beach ball, which will always, always, always be quite a memorable incident. Almost as memorable as the Chase question about that. Have you seen it? What did Darren Bent... Oh, sorry, what was on the field when Darren Bent scored a goal against Liverpool? I can't remember one of the options, but obviously the beach ball was one and an ice cream van was the other. And the ice cream van was the one that the person selected on the Chase. Is the right answer.
But the process of elimination, eh? Brilliant.
That's right.
But I was going to say that I was sat in the north stand at the opposite end. So my season ticket was behind the goal, the north stand. So it was at the opposite end. And when this first happened, it had actually looked like somebody else had kicked the proper ball and Darren Bent had kicked the beach ball because the beach ball went off to the left. The ball went off to the right. And from where we went, we kind of said, well, who scored? Because Darren Bent kicked the beach ball away because it was so far away. And we didn't have a clue what had happened. We just saw this red thing just bounce away to one side. And we saw the keeper kind of go towards the beach ball. And so from the opposite end, it was just this confusion to say, we don't know how the hell that ball's ended up in the back of the net.
I was similar to yourself, Chris. I was at the opposite end of the pitch. I mentioned earlier, didn't I, that it was the 17th is my best mate's birthday. I didn't know there was any sort of controversy until that night when I met up with him in the town for a night out. And, you get talking about the game and he says, Faye, it was a bit of a queer one, wasn't it? Off a beach ball. I just looked at him and thought, have you already been on it? Have you already been knocking back a few drinks? I had no idea what he was talking about. So it's such a bizarre incident. But, it was a fab finish off the ice cream van. And of course, hundreds and thousands of Sunderland fans celebrated when that one went in.
Well,
did it go in like a rocket?
And that was one of 99 goals that Darren Bent scored for the club. So there you go. Funny one about that. I was still living at home at the time, and I was actually on a long haul flight. And at the time, they didn't have live TV or anything like that, but they had news updates that would come on to the TV screens. So I'm sat with my dad, and we're trying to find out what the score is. And it just has a line saying Sunderland beat Liverpool 1-0 with a goal that deflected off a beach ball. And that was it. And we're going, what? And we had to wait for hours to find out any more than that very factual statement. And you go, somebody's been drunk when they've typed in the scores or something like that. It was a bizarre thing.
I always remember the match of the day coverage didn't really cover what the rules were. They just showed that it was a Liverpool fan who threw it on and went, there you go. That's all you need to know.
There's a lesson in that for you, isn't it? A good life lesson, I suspect. We will move on to October the 18th now in 1924. Sunderland played a 1-1 draw against Newcastle United, and that was the first time more than 50,000 people had packed into the ground. Officially, with 55,642 there. 1961, there was a game at Roker where a Football Association 11 lost 2-1 to an Army team. And that Army team featured Jim Baxter, then of Glasgow Rangers, and there was a number of other famous players. I think Bobby Charlton was in the Football Association 11 and people like that, but that was quite a big game. And 1998, there was a game at West Bromwich Albion, and it was quite a topsy-turvy, dramatic end-to-end game, Chris.
It was, but it was a strange one purely because we played them the season before, and it was a bit of a watershed moment because the season before, obviously, was that first season at the Stadium of Light, and we had that run that took us to the playoffs in the end. But it was the whole Easter kind of blow up. That was the big kind of talking point at the end, where we were looking for automatic promotion, and then we got 2 draws over the Easter weekend, and one of them was against Queen's Park Rangers on the Friday. Mike Keiron scoring that late goal. Martin, did you want to step in?
I was just going to step in and say I've still got Mike Sheeran's face on my dartboard.
Yeah. Because I was sure we were going to do it with the run we were on. And these 2 draws kind of came out the blue a little bit. The fact that we drew against Queen's Park Rangers on the Friday at home was a surprise. But yeah, the draw against West Brom on the Monday, so that was back in April. That I was at both of these games at the Hawthorns, and we went 2-0 down, and this was after the Friday, and then we got it back to 3-2 up, and Michael Gray had been sent off. And then in the last, we thought we'd kind of done it. We thought, right, we've got 3 points. 4 points isn't so bad over that weekend. And then Lee Hughes goes and scores a last-minute goal. And then you kind of fast forward to the October, and this is when we started that season off where we're absolutely flying. We still hadn't lost because we didn't lose until late November when we played Barnsley. So it was almost this, right, well, and we've heard all the stories about the team getting back on the coach after Wembley and saying, right, well, next season we're just going to do it. And it was funny because I remember going to the Hawthorns, and it was a bit of, I don't know, kind of, putting the demons to bed almost that last season, because West Brom was such a focal point in the fact that we didn't get promoted. It was still Dennis Smith manager at West Brom, and it was only in the October. So we went to Hawthorns quite early, and it was almost this watershed moment that if we went to West Brom and kind of exercised those demons, it was like, right, we're on course almost. It was one of them. And we went 2-0 down after half an hour. Lee Hughes again, he always seemed to do us, Lee Hughes. And he was always one of these players who didn't seem to be good at anything, but seemed to just bag loads of goals. He wasn't quick. He wasn't good in the air. He wasn't particularly skillful, but he just bagged 25, 30 goals a season. He was such a strange player. But they had Kevin Kilban in their team as well. And like I said, just after the half hour, Lee Hughes put them 2-0 up. And it was still 2-0 to them going into the last 20, 25 minutes of the game. And Andy Melville scored first, and we were still 2-1 down with 10 minutes to go. But interestingly, when you look at it, Peter Reid played Niall Quinn and Danny Ditchie up front.
He used to do that sometimes, didn't he? Never.
Yeah, tall man partnership when Michael Bridges was on the bench. But Michael Bridges came on with about half an hour to go, and that's when we started scoring the goals. Like I said, Melville got one soon after. Last 10 minutes, Bridges got one, and then with 4 minutes to go, Kevin Ball got the goal as well. And neither day was fun for Michael Gray because he was sent off in the first one, and he came off injured at half time in this one. But yeah, this time we got the result, and we got the late goal to win. Kevin Ball scored that late goal. But I just remember this because, like I said, I was at the Hawthorns both days, and I went to the Hawthorns the second time thinking, oh God, memories of that, draw that we got at Easter, and thinking, but we hadn't lost, but I still had this feeling. And, it's almost typical Sunderland. You think, right, this run's been so good. we're going to go to the Hawthorns, and is this the place where it's all going to kind of come apart and we're going to lose our first one and all this? But we went there, went 2-0 down and still won 3-2. And it was kind of that point where I just thought, we're going to win this league pretty easy now. And it was a complete mindset change from the season before. And just remember, because I remember within a few months going to Hawthorns twice and them both being big moments, I thought.
Yeah, it kind of signaled a real belief, I think, didn't it, in the players and in the fans. I think that was a real turning point for that season, because you see all that talk after Wembley and all that sort of stuff. The season starts well, but it's kind of those sort of games where the team fights back and shows real backbone and strength of character, and that determination that we showed that day was superb.
Yeah, well, we'd drawn the 3 games leading up to it as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, forgotten about
that. You both use very good terminology there. Kind of the mindset was changing. It signaled a bit of belief in the team. Just a little thing going off the back of last week's episode. It wasn't on Time Tees, but I seem to think it was a Sunday game on Sky Sports.
It was on Sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that was just another little sign that this club, probably ever since we moved to the Stadium of Light, had just all of those usual tropes about Sunderland that you'd kind of learned to live with. Oh, we're rubbish on TV. Once we're 2-0 down, we can't come from behind. Blah, blah, blah. There was this change in attitude around the club and a belief that, like, hey, we're not just going to accept all of these pathetic, weak elements to our game. We're going to start turning these things around. So yeah, it was a real time of change and attitude at the club.
And it's a funny one when you look back at the team selection. I'm just sort of scrolling back through the different lineups that Peter Reid had named that season, because Quinny got injured in the second game of the season away at Swindon, and he came off just after half time to be replaced by Danny Dickio. Mickey Bridges was also on the bench, but wasn't used. So Dickio replaced Quinn, which you kind of expect him to do. A few games later, Dickio was still partnering Kevin Phillips up front. Phillips is injured in that home League Cup tie against Chester. In the Oxford game, Mickey Bridges comes in to replace Phillips. Both Dickio and Bridges scored 2 each, and we win 7-0. Alex Ray got 2 and Mickey Gray got 1. You go to the next game, and understandably, Peter Reid keeps Dickio and Bridges up front together. Niall Quinn's back on the bench. He's coming back into contention. He's fit again. I think he'd had he been on the bench against Oxford? He had. He came on very late against Oxford in that game. So Quinn was come back into fitness. We go to Norwich away. Quinn comes back into the team, but at the expense of Bridges. So he puts Quinn and Dickio up front. We draw 2-2. Quinn scores very early on in that game. We play at home against Bradford. The next game, Quinn and Dickio start up front again, 0-0. Mickey Bridges unused as a substitute, which is again, I always think it's strange when you look back on games and there was no subs made. For any subs not to be made in these days would be remarkable. But when you look at a game that's 0-0 at home and you've got a good striker on the bench, you kind of think it's a bit strange not to chuck him on. And then you go away to West Brom and he keeps Quinn and Dickio up front to start that game as well. So Reid always liked Dickio. And as regular listeners will know, I didn't necessarily agree with that one. But it's again a good turning point in that season. We will move on to 1999, because this was another game that was on Sky TV just a year later. And again, we were playing a team from the Midlands, this time at Roker Park, and we beat Villa 2-1, Chris.
We did. And, again, just unbelievable when you say these things out loud. But this made it 5 in a row, which it was just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, again, we'd just been promoted. We talked about it just briefly there, changing mindset. When we beat West Brom at the start of that season, we ended up getting 105 points. And we'll focus a little bit on Stefan Schwarz for this game, because obviously he came in 3.75 million from Valencia, 30 years old. But he just had everything we needed. Tough in the tackle, skillful on the ball, never gave the ball away. And we'll come back on him for this Villa game because well documented how we started the season. When we went to Chelsea, Chris Lumsden, of course, got the nod, and Thomas Helmer was on the bench and all of that. And we'd had a bit of we've mentioned it before. We've had a bit of a strange summer because we were excited, but we lost Lee Clark, we lost Andy Melville, we lost Alan Johnson, we lost Michael Bridges. So we lost quite a few players in that summer, but Stefan Schwarz was the one we hung our hat onto. That was the big signing that summer, and of course there was the likes of Steve Bold as well, who was fantastic as well. But people
you're forgetting Carson Predgard, Chris.
Oh yes, of course, yeah, the chocolate fire guard. How could I forget that? But yeah, I mean, look, you look at that first 6 games of the season, and there's this kind of, sometimes when you look back, you go, oh well, we just came out the blocks and we were fantastic. You're looking at Sunderland's start in the current season, going back to 1999-2000, we won 2 of our first 6 games, and so at that point it was still right. Well, where's this season going? We're still going to have a relegation battle. Everyone kind of accepted that. We got beat off Chelsea, beat Watford, who came up with us. So that was a kind of almost, that's one we had to win. Then a good draw at home to Arsenal, got beat at Leeds, beat the Mags, and then we drew at Coventry. So it was still a bit, where are we? Where do we stand? And then we just went off on this run. We beat Leicester at home 2-0, beat Derby away 5-0, beat Sheffield Wednesday at home 1-0, beat Bradford away 4-0. And at this point, after Bradford, we went second in the table. And our next game is a night game against Aston Villa, live on Sky. John Gregory's Aston Villa. They'd finished 6th the season before. So it was a big game, and Sky knew it. We were kind of up there on merit. We won 4 on the bounce in the Premier League. And then in the kind of build up to this as well, what we're like with Omens, with players who've played against us. Julian Georgiam was out of the game, so we were celebrating because he always scored against us. I remember every time we played at Filbert Street, it always seemed to be Julian Georgiam who got the goals. But yeah, Darius Vassell came in actually for Villa. It was only his 3rd start for Villa in this game, and because we were on the run, Peter Reid, and he quite often did this when we were on a roll, just kept everything the same. So it was the starting 11 that beat Bradford 4-0 in our previous league game. But yeah, and I think Sky expected fireworks, and the first half was absolutely crap. There was a few half chances, but it wasn't the best game. And then just after the break, Steve Bold made a rare kind of error, a bit of a clumsy challenge midway inside our own half. Alan Thompson, of course, for Newcastle United and all that, he took an in-swinging free kick. And it was quite low at the near post, but Dion Dublin, who was always great at these things, just kind of got his head on it at the near post from almost the edge of the area. If you watch this goal, it's from miles out. But yeah, Dion Dublin did this sort of thing, and yeah, we were goal down. But as we did so often in these games, we got back just after the hour, and it was almost a trademark Peter Reid thing at the time. Paul Butler got the ball on the halfway line and just did a big, long diagonal. And who was at the back post, like he always was? Niall Quinn. And he kind of took the ball down on his chest, which he did. And Damien Delaney was in front of him and put his hand in the air for whatever reason, because he was confused at what Quinny was doing, clearly. And it was a penalty. And this was before VAR, so they couldn't go back and have a look at it. And David Ellery pointed to the spot. Kevin Phillips sent David James the wrong way, and then at the time James Brown was playing loudly over the PA system because we all felt good because we equalised. But yeah, it was close after that. And then it was the last came at the last 10 minutes. Now this is where I wanted to come back onto Stefan Schwarz. Mickey Gray, and the season before, him and Alan Johnson were unbelievable down that left. Now, he had to form this new partnership with Stefan Schwarz, where Schwarz came into the middle a little bit. So he wasn't just that winger that Mickey Gray could bomb down the outside and kind of either a decoy run or get the ball in the overlap. He just gave the ball to to Stefan Schwarz on the left-hand side, about level with the 18-yard box. Stefan Schwarz just, some players would kind of take a touch, and in the modern day, they'd roll this back to the fullback because he virtually had no backlift right on the touchline. And he just whipped the ball in, inch perfect, right onto Kevin. And Kevin Phillips, I think he was outnumbered 3 or 4 to 1 in the middle. But he didn't have to move for the ball. It was right on his head, 6 yards out. And it just gave David James absolutely no chance. But that was the brilliance of Stefan Schwarz. We all talk about how fantastic he was in the tackle, and I loved that side of his game. But he wasn't half a good player on the ball. I mean, you watch this goal back. What an unbelievable cross this was. But as I said at the start, 5 straight wins in the Premier League on our first season back. I mean, I wonder how we'd celebrate if we did that this year. But yeah, unbelievable times, and thought it would last forever.
No, it was fantastic run, wasn't it? Absolutely. 2003. Now we beat Walsall at home 1-0. Marcus Stewart scored a goal. Alan Quinn, who was on loan from Sheffield Wednesday, made his debut for us. But there was a player who we've already mentioned in the podcast today was in the Walsall team. Very quickly, do you want to have a guess who that is?
Oh. I don't remember mentioning him. The only one I can think of who's played for both clubs is Darren. Go on.
Don Goodman?
No, good shout though.
No.
The only one I can think of is Darren Byfield, but I think he went from Sunderland to Walsall, not the other way around.
Yeah, it was Jamie Lawrence, as he was known then. Jamie Lawrence was in the Walsall team that day, so there you go. And sorry, Chris, I want to go back to Julian Joachim, actually, just for a second. While you were talking about Joachim and his record against us, I had a look, and in his career, he started 10 games against us, right? And he scored 7 goals, including a goal for Leeds. And I don't even remember him playing for Leeds. But throughout his career, he was a 1-in-4, 1-in-5 striker. He wasn't a better than 1-in-2 striker, but whenever he came to play against Sunderland, he seemed to enjoy himself. So we're quite right to be glad he wasn't in the Aston Villa lineup that day.
Yeah, well, he enjoyed playing against Terry Butcher particularly. When Butcher had a 30-yard head start on him, George Jim still beat him to the ball.
I think give a cart horse a 30-yard head start against Terry Butcher in those days at the end of his career, and it would have been a fairly good race. Well, not the end of his career. I don't think it's particularly harsh. I think it's probably a statement of fact. But anyway, we will move on, because on the 18th of October 2014, we suffered an 8-0 defeat at Southampton, which equalled one of our record worst ever competitive defeats. And it must be the month for it, because we're going to go into another game with a very similar scoreline shortly, but we are going to take a quick break and we'll be back after these ads.
No one should have to choose between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina is helping to create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters through the Purple Leash Project, so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
Whether your business has 6 floors or 6 employees, Walmart Business has everything you need to save time, money, and hassle. You can restock your break room with bulk ordering or bulk up your ordering team with shared payments. And you can get it all delivered straight to your business's door, whether that's on Wall Street or Main Street. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
Welcome back to How We're the podcast for another episode of On This Week. Now, you're going to join us now for a look back at a bit of a dark day, I guess, in Sunderland history, Kelvin. It was a game away at West Ham United, and I think everybody knows what happened to some extent, but you're going to shed a little bit more light on it for us.
Well, lads, I'm going to try and shed some light, but I must take a nod at last week's pod here because I've got a little song for you. My old man said, follow Sunderland and don't dilly-dally on the way. Off went the coach with the boot boys in it. We took West Ham in half a minute. That's it. And we didn't take West Ham. We got absolutely good. Going into that game, I have to say, the Portents were very, very good going into that game. A bit like what we were saying about Man United last week, really. West Ham had failed to win their previous 6 league games, and they hadn't beaten Sunderland on their patch for 42 years, believe it or not. We were in 10th position going into the game with only 2 losses in 10 games, and we'd drawn 5 of our previous 7 away that season, which wasn't too bad. You know, if you can win your home games, draw your away games, not too bad at all. We'd played very well at Roker Park on the previous Saturday. I'd been there. I really enjoyed the game. We defeated Nottingham Forest with goals from a free-scoring young forward, Colin Suggett, who would feature in this game, Bullock Mulhall, and what turned out to be C. Serwin's only goal for Sunderland. So we were coming into that game off a cracking performance. Charlie Hurley, he'd played at the Bowling 3 times previously against Jeff Hurst, West Ham's feared centre-forward and World Cup hero, and Hursty had never had a kick. He'd never scored a goal. He'd never got near the goal. Hurley had kept him quiet. There were a couple of things going on with the team, though. We had some good young'uns playing for us that season, and 3 of them were missing. Colin Todd, tellingly missing from the back. It was the only game that he would miss all season. Bobby Kerr was still working his way back from his 2nd leg break. He played a couple of games, but it did feel like Alan Brown was trying to bleed him back in gently. And Billy Hughes, who was starting to hit his straps, was missing for this game. He'd picked up a knock. So Ralph Brand had come into the side. Now, he's an experienced forward, Ralph Brand, with certainly a good history, but he never really did much for us. And that was his 3rd game of the season, and it proved to be his last for Sunderland. So there were a lot of reasons for thinking that we might go there and get a result, for sure. The game itself, for goodness sake, half-time, we're 4-0 down. By 72 minutes, we're 8-0 down. And believe it or not, according to Bob Cass in the Journal, we mounted a spirited comeback from 73 minutes with Colin Suggett, who he'd grazed the crossbar in the first half, and he absolutely smashed a great shot off the crossbar, off the woodwork, in the dying embers of the game. What went wrong? By all accounts, West Ham served up their best team performance of the season, whilst we probably had a number of players not at it for 90 minutes. One of them wasn't Monty, who was described by Bob Cass in the Journal as diving and leaping like an Olympic gymnast to keep the score to single figures with some great saves. Bob Cass exonerated Harvey, Hurley, Irwin. He said they kept going in spite of the constant pressure, and Suggett never stopped probing, despite ploughing something of a loan for up front. For West Ham, again, I'm quoting Bob Cass a bit here. He was waxing lyric about this West Ham team, but he did say that West Ham, it's well known that the Hammers are like the little girl with the little curl in the middle of her forehead. When they are good, they are very, very good. and when they are bad, they are horrid. And that was his words on West Ham. A lot of the reports I read on this game were it was Bobby Moore that was orchestrating this performance. He, like Charlie Hurley, was a footballer in the half-back, and he was at the heart of most of the Hammers' attacks, as well as arguably scoring the best goal of the game, which was a viciously struck swerving free kick that Monty had no chance with from about 25 yards for the second goal on 25 minutes. But I tell you what, lads, in this game, and it could have all been so different if the ref had spotted Jeff Hurst's punch into the net for his first goal. I feel like on such moments, games like this are won or lost. And the ref definitely missed it. It was a cross, I believe, from Bobby Moore. Jeff Hurst took a dive at it. He was known for his diving headers. And he missed it with his head, but caught it with his fist and knocked it into the back of the goal. Now, remember, this was 1968. Hurst's a national institution for his 3 goals against West Germany in the World Cup in 1966. I don't know whether you've heard or read much about that game. So Hursty, he admitted after the game that
what happened in '66, Kelvin?
Yeah. We've heard it all before, over and over, again and again. England won the World Cup, didn't they?
Yeah, there you go.
Aye.
Clip that,
But this icon of English football, Jeff Hurst, admitted after the game that he punched the ball into the net, but he was unrepentant, much to the surprise of some in the national media who consider him an icon of fair play and English football and beyond reproach. But there were a number of commentators, a number of journalists that commented on this, that he had admitted that he'd punched it into the back of the net. And a funny little sideshow to this was when I was going down to Wembley for the playoff final, I got speaking to an old boy and his grandson on the bus, and he did his ends about this goal. It was very, very funny. I asked him what one of his favourite memories was, and then asked him, what's one of your worst memories? he talked about Hurst punching the ball in the back of the net, and that if he hadn't done it, or if the ref had seen it, we would never have gotten beat 8-0, you know. I ended up counselling him about trying to let things go, you know, after all this time. Anyway, the goals, Hurst scored on 20 minutes. Bobby Moore scored that free kick on 25. Hurst again, 33 minutes, 43 minutes, 48 minutes and 61 minutes. And then a young Trevor Brooken scores on 62 minutes. He was actually playing up front that day, Brooken. And then Hurst scores on 72 minutes. And then we've got our comeback from 73 minutes onwards. There's a marvellous quote. I've always loved it, and I've used it a few times. Ronald Aitken in The Observer reported that Hurst was allowed to keep the match ball after the game, which was only proper as he had it for most of the game. And Alan Brown, remarkably, and I remember this from the time, I can remember my dad telling us about this. Alan Brown, he wasn't noted for his humour, you know, and he said in his after-match conference, it was an even game. We conceded 4 in each half. Charlie Hurley, years afterwards, he was, there was a bit of a mutual appreciation thing going on. I know Jeff Hurst always rated Charlie Hurley as an exceptional centre forward, but Hurley said about this game many years later, he says, Hursty was bleeding dynamite. He used to time his runs to the near post brilliantly. They had a very good team, though. 8-0 flattered us. um, and Jeff Hurst still says that this was probably his best game ever for West Ham. It was a record defeat. Sunderland equalled that in, I think it was 1982-83 at Watford. And then the 8-0 at Southampton, which was oddly enough just the day before. We suffered away from home that season. We never won an away game on the road till our second last game at Burnley, which turned out to be Charlie Hurley and George Mulhall's last ever games for Sunderland. So quite a poignant one, really. I've sort of very clear memories of this result, and the result being read out on with the football scores on this one. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But there's a couple of oddities about the West Ham team that day, who, apart from Hurst, they had Martin Peters, Bobby Moore, Harry Redknapp was in the team, a very good winger called John Sissons. I always really liked him. I always thought he was a cracking player, but there were a couple of other lads playing. So Bobby Ferguson was playing, but not the Bobby Ferguson who would later come and coach us, and with all his Ipswich connections. This Ferguson, he was a Scottish international goalkeeper. He played 276 games in 13 years for West Ham. But West Ham had three great keepers. They had Mervyn Day, a young lad who played quite a bit for them later on. I think Mervyn Day was in goals when we beat them 6-0 in that marvellous run in 76-77. And they had another great keeper called Peter Grotier. So the three of them would do battle for the number one position. But what I always remember about Bobby Ferguson, apart from he's got the same name as one of my ex-coaches, was that when he played in the reserves, quite often he didn't play in goals. He was a fly-in winger and they played him on the wing. So there cannot be too many lads that have the ability to do that. Although we were on about Tony Norman the other week, weren't we, being really good outfield, but he used to play games for the reserves as a winger. Now this lad, when he finished playing, when he retired, he emigrated to Adelaide in Australia, and he put all his goalie skills to good use by opening a diving school and he ran that for 6 years. Until he packed it in after one of his colleagues was attacked by a shark. And apparently he thought life by the Thames hadn't prepared him for such things. So that was Bobby Ferguson. And the other lad that was interesting in that team, again, a lad that always caught me attention, he went by the nickname of Charlo, and it was John Charles. So he had a very famous name, but it wasn't the John Charles. This lad was... He was known as Charlo. He caught my eye from a very, very early age. He was a very, very handy fullback. He played for West Ham from 1962 to 1971. And he was the first black player to play for England under 18 and at any national level for England. He was the first black player to play for West Ham when he made his debut in 1963, and his younger brother played, again, I can remember this lad playing, Clive Charles, and he went on to manage the United States soccer team. So they were a right football and family, the Charles, and he had a very famous name. I don't know whether his dad named him after John Charles, because he was a fantastic player, John Charles, in his own right. We're 8-0's a hell of a thrashing, but we did recover to wallop Coventry at home the following Saturday. We beat them 3-0. And I have to say that was the first home game of the season I missed. I wasn't there, having been confined to barracks by my good father for succumbing to the goading of my Tooney supporting brother as the 8-0 scoreline came through on the football results. I just couldn't stop myself as he was goading us from launching myself at him. And unfortunately, he was sitting on the couch. And when I launched myself, I knocked the couch over and broke it. And my father confined us to barracks for a week. So I missed the Coventry game off the back of that 8-0 West Ham hammering. I did learn from the punishment. I definitely learned from the punishment and made sure that I was never caught again battering him for goading me. So that's the rundown of that game. Certainly historically significant in the sense of a right good thrashing. It wasn't the first time, would have another two of them in my lifetime, but I certainly remember that one with not too much humour, I have to say. For a young lad, it was quite hard to take. I just wanted to go to my bed and put the covers over my head. And my father actually gave us that opportunity when he saw the set. Hey, so you can get your ass upstairs to your bed, son, and don't be looking to go to the game next week either. You're on jankers. So there you go. What a reason for remembering the game. But
there we go.
Bobby Moore, though, lads, just to say, and I know he's Hursty's here. Yeah, hat-trick hero, but what a player Bobby Moore was. That lad could play anywhere. He was a fantastic player to watch on the ball, lovely ball player and lovely user of the ball. You tend to think of him just as a centre half. He wasn't. He was a really, really good footballer, Bobby Moore, and definitely ran that game. 8-0.
Excellent, thank you. 8-0. Not a few stories to remember from that. It's always nice to look back at some of these things, but yeah, the memory of a broken couch and missing the following week's game. The lesson, of course, being there, don't do things where people can see. Andrew, something to chuck in there, mate?
I was just wondering, I mean, Kelvin there has kind of answered this question by saying he managed to get into bother with his dad. I have often wondered how you dealt with a heavy defeat back in the day, particularly one where you were not at the game. Because nowadays, if Sunderland get humped, what do? You're straight on your phone texting to your mate saying, oh, that was absolute crap, that. Or in our case, you can record a pod, or you go on social media, or you go on a message group, or you can ring in a radio show. There must have been something quite detached in those days. You just see the score coming through.
Aye.
There's no highlights floating around. And until you get a copy of the Football Pink or the Football Echo or whatever it is where you live, you kind of got nowhere to put that negative energy. You can't get it off your chest anywhere other than by turning around and giving your brother a clip.
It's
something that's always interested me.
You're right there, Andrew. You're right. And it was frustrating because your little trannies weren't always reliable. You could hear the cackling, and you could hear it on the tranny, and you knew that we'll go over to Roker Park, we'll go over to the bowling ground, and then all you pick up is cackling and stuff. God, it used to drag me mad as a laddie not being able to get the score, and then the score would come through on the video, on the teleprinter, you'd sit there with bated breath watching the teleprinter, hoping to Christ that would pull back that 8-0. It's just 8-0. We've got a chance, Colin Suggett's still on the pitch.
I'm sure back then as well, when it got over a certain number, it actually spelt it out in letters to make sure people knew it wasn't a mistake.
Yeah,
one of the things that definitely worked was having a brother that was a Newcastle fan.
Yeah, I think you can probably argue it both ways, can't you? You can argue it that having all of the connection and being able to see everything and read about everything and talk about everything instantaneously is better in that respect. But it's very easy to just remove yourself and forget about it and get on with things in those days as well. I think for clarity, we need to point out that Kelvin was talking about transistor radios there when he was talking a little. just to avoid any correspondence coming in for
Yeah, we get to hear about that trip. Yeah.
Oh God, there's no dress in that era up, is there?
Kelvin, any more slurs like that, and we're going to ground you again, and you're going to not be allowed to go to the Wolves game.
I don't know what's more dangerous ground, this or the 1879-1880 debate.
It's a pretty fine line, I think, isn't it? Anyway, we will move on to 1985. Now, this is a game that interests me. So we drew 2-2 away at Carlisle. Obviously, we were in the second division. Carlisle had a pretty good, or exceptionally good run, actually, when you look at their history. They'd got up into the second division. They'd been in contention for promotion from the second division. And Bob Stokoe had been in charge. The game itself, we drew 2-2 away at Brunton Park. Sean Elliott and Howard Gale got goals for us. John Cook, Jackie Ashurst, and a lad called John Halpin, who were all former Sunderland players. I think John Halpin was on Sunderland's books but didn't actually make any first-team appearances. They were all in Carlisle's team. But Bob Stokoe and Carlisle got relegated that season. When you look at Bob Stokoe at Carlisle, he seemed to have this spell where he'd taken them up to the second division, got them sort of challenging for promotion. He left them very briefly, came back very briefly for that season, then left again. Of course, a year or 18 months later, he was back at Roker Park. But does anybody know why he left Carlisle in that brief period? Because I couldn't find out anything about why he left and then was reappointed.
I know. I don't know if this was the occasion, but I think it was kind of well documented that he took a couple of breaks every now and again from football because I think he did suffer really bad from migraines, didn't he? And that went way back. So if I had to guess, it might potentially be something to do with that.
And it's interesting because we stayed up that season. Just Carlisle went down. We went down the following season, but Carlisle went down again. So by the time we were in the third division, they were in the second division. So they kind of had a double relegation, which we were acquainted with at some point not so long ago. 1996 was the game at Southampton where Tony Courton had broken his leg. A terrible, terrible injury that Courton suffered. And that was to be his last appearance for us. He signed as a 35-year-old, but he'd started the season so well. He'd looked rock solid in goal. Mm-hmm. Lionel Perez had been signed to deputise him, not really expecting to play much of a part for Sunderland that season, to be perfectly honest. But he came on as sub, and he was a goalkeeper for the rest of the season. But that injury to Courton followed. Was it a couple of weeks after, a couple of weeks before Niall Quinn suffered an injury which ruled him out for most of the season. I think it was a couple of weeks before at home against Coventry. And I think that was a game that we won 1-0 with Steve Agnew scoring. But yeah, we lost Quinn and Courton within 10 or 11 games of the new season. Reed's two big signings going up that year, and that was a devastating blow. 2002, we talked a little bit about Howard Wilkinson and Steve Cottrell last week. This was Howard Wilkinson's first game in charge of Sunderland, October the 19th. We of course lost 1-0 to West Ham United. Jermaine Defoe and Paolo Di Canio were in the West Ham team. And the goal scorer was Trevor Sinclair, who we had been so strongly linked with a season or two before. At that time, Don Hutchison was leaving the club. For a long time, it looks as if it was going to be a straight swap for Trevor Sinclair. And even after Hutchison went, there was still loads of talk that Sinclair was going to end up at at the Stadium of Light under Peter Reid, but that never materialised. And yes, Sinclair scored that goal. And of course, that was Niall Quinn's last game for the club. He came on as sub. And he didn't really fancy playing under Wilkinson, and injuries and all of that sort of stuff had finally taken its toll.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure as well it might have been Claudio Reyna's last home game.
It was, because he got injured at Bolton in the following game, didn't he?
Yeah, and that was him done, wasn't it? He did his cruciates, I think. And
well, again, you look at so many things in that season, but I think the injury to Reyna is seriously underestimated in terms of the impact it had on anything else that happened subsequently. You can talk as much as you like about Wilkinson, Cottrell, and all the stuff that they did or didn't do, but that injury to Reyna was massive, because he was pivotal for that side. Or he could have been pivotal anyway.
Oh, I thought he was a fantastic player. I remember a goal at home to Leicester, I think it was.
He scored 2 in that game in pretty quick succession. Fantastic player.
Yeah. So that was like you said, it just kept building up, just kept adding to the list that year, didn't it?
It sure did. Now, for our last little bit that we're going to talk in depth about today, we are going back to 1991 and a game at Port Vale, Andrew.
Yes, cheers, Martin. We've spoken about this period a few times in the last couple of episodes. Obviously, this was the fallout from the sale of Marco Gabbiadini and how things hadn't really improved for Dennis Smith. I think we'd only won 1 in 6 league and cup games since Marco had moved on. The rest had all been lost. And there was that absolute shocker at Cambridge United that we touched upon last week, where Bennett was played up front, and Chris was talking about Steve Smelt getting booked. When your physio's getting booked, that just says things are not going well. On that booking, interestingly enough, Paul Bracewell had a weekly column in the Sports Echo, and the following week he was actually claiming that the referee had initially allowed Smelt onto the pitch to go and look after Peter Beagrie, who'd gone down after a foul. But then once he'd come on the pitch, changed his mind and then brandished that yellow card to Steve Smelt for coming onto the pitch. So, just I don't know if Paul Bracewell's version was accurate or not, Chris.
Can we mention Steve Smelt without mentioning Felt by Smelt again? Or have we already done that?
No, it's obligatory.
That's well.
Contractually, we have to, yeah.
Don't worry, I was going to drop that in, because I don't want a third group of people banging on my door saying, you didn't mention Felt by Smelt. What, you playing not?
Good man. Just double checking you're following the rules, Andrew.
Of course, yes. I don't want to be getting myself into any more trouble. So yeah, whether Bracewell's account of things was accurate or not, I don't know. But that just sums up the feeling around the place. Even your physio is managing to get a yellow card. It just madness. The Sports Echo, again, I'll just touch upon that. The letters page on the 19th when we played Port Vale were an absolute bin fire. Just people left, right and centre, popping off shots at everybody. You name it. Smith was getting it. Murray was getting it. I asked Kelvin earlier about how did people respond and where did they vent their anger on the back of a defeat. I remember the letters page in the Football Echo or the Sports Echo, depending on what year you were reading it. I remember they could get pretty heavy. You'd often get a couple of funny ones thrown in there, but sometimes people were pretty harsh in those letters pages. Mm-hmm. Did you read those back in the day, lads? They could be pretty vicious, Oh,
they certainly could. It was always good reading, wasn't it? But, the effort, and, it's at different times and all that sort of stuff, but the effort to actually write a letter, take it, go and buy a stamp, take it to the post office, put it in the post box, and wait for a few days to see if it's made the cut on Saturday. It's it deserves to be published, doesn't it? If you go into that much effort to make your feelings known.
Yeah, but when you say effort, if that was the only method of doing it, like, it doesn't feel like effort, does it?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I would, in today's circumstances where you've got all access instantaneous to make whatever feelings known that you want. But there's actually a bit of prestige as well in getting published. If your letter gets chosen, it's like if you called up one of the radio stations, which we know Kelvin's familiar with. If you get chosen to if you get chosen to get through onto the radio station, it was always a good thing, a great thing. You'd achieved something, and you were seeing your letters in the, whether it was the Pink or the Football Echo or whatever. I remember writing to Greavesy and Shoot magazine to try to get a letter published, and I never got one in there, but it was always a stiff competition for Shoot.
My letters page, the one I used to watch, to read, lads, was in the Sunday Sun, which was like the Sunday paper for the Journal, you know.
That Deirdre.
Yeah, please can you...
that was a Sun, wasn't it? Sorry, Kelvin.
Please, can you fix my cackling tranny, Deirdre? Yeah. So, oh yeah, my God. So what I never understood, you'd go to the game on the Saturday, it would be diabolical, you know, it would be 8-0 to West Ham. You'd open the Sunday Sun on the Sunday morning, and there'd be letters complaining about the game on the Saturday. I never understood how they got their letters in quick enough. How did they do that? You know, there must have been, I don't know how they would do that, but there would be letters referring to the game on the Saturday, and the paper was out on the Sunday. I never got my head around that. But oh God, I used to love those letters. And me dad, who was starting to lose his sight in the from the mid-70s, mid-70s onwards, he used to get me to read some of these letters out. He would say, have a read of that letters page and see if there's any stonkers in there, you know, and he'd sit sort of giggling away at the daftness of some of the letters and the just contained fury that some people... it's always been an enviable sort of skill or quality, that, hasn't it? Being able to put your fury down into comprehensible words, you know. I've always admired that ability to be able to do that. I bring back the letters page, lad.
Anyway, Andrew, back to the 1991.
Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew.
Page,
no, not at all. Not at all. I do love that idea, though, of some fella stomping down to his nearest letterbox and, like, angrily shoving the envelope in there, you know, or shouting at his wife in the house, "Margaret, Deirdre, where's me paper and pen? I've just got to get this off my chest." In all seriousness, it was pretty harsh, some of the things that were getting said. Feeling around the club was not high. This is something we might touch upon in due course. Viv Busby, Dennis Smith's assistant, went in December of that year. And like I say, we might touch on that nearer the time, but already there's cracks starting to appear, and you wonder what's going on, because Smith has brought Malcolm Crosby in from the reserve team, coaching setup to the first team to try and freshen things up. You know, you looking back on it now with that knowledge about what happened with Busby eventually, you're thinking, is something amiss there? Smith, give him his dues, he was trying everything he could. He was making a lot of changes to the team. As we said, he's thrown Bennett up front, which really didn't work. But you just wonder sometimes when a manager's making all of these changes, is it desperation by that point? Are they just throwing things against the wall and see what stick? Don't get the feeling that there's much calculated thought behind some of these choices. So yeah, we're going into the game at Vale Park not in good shape. Again, Smith has made changes. Kieron Brady comes in for his first start of the season. Peter Davenport's brought back into the side.
With that, Andrew, as well, I'm sorry if you're going to come on to this, but Brady was only in the team because Thomas Hauser failed a late fitness test.
Well, again, there's another thing that's just not working out. You've sold your star striker, and then one of the strikers you expect to be playing is injured. I'd love to know what Davenport thought about that Cambridge game the previous week, because from what I can tell, it was Davenport that dropped out to allow this experiment with Gary Bennett up front. So, is there a little bit of resentment there? Is he kind of thinking, what, you're dropping me for a centre-back? You could take that as a bit of an insult, I don't know. Davenport and Brady were brought in. The other change was not to the players, to the personnel, it was to the kit. It was one of those rare occasions where we wore red and white stripes, but with red shorts, which, I don't know, it's not something we'd want to happen regularly, but it looks quite nice every now and again if the lads have got the traditional colours, but pair them with red shorts. The game itself, you could tell straight away that things were not right. We went behind in the 3rd minute from a corner, but already by that point, Tony Norman's had to have made a couple of excellent saves. So, 3 minutes in, we're 1-0 down, we're getting absolutely battered. We somehow managed to get to half-time, only 1 goal behind. And again, it's purely because Tony Norman's having one of his days. He had them from time to time, didn't he, when he seemed to pull off brilliant reflex save after brilliant save. So yeah, we get to half time and we're 1-0 down, and you think, are we going to get back into this? Well, if anything, the second half is even worse. Let's just get this. I've actually downloaded a couple of PDFs from the Sports Echo. I've got to admit, when I do this research for these things, lads, I end up losing half a day because I'll pull up a football echo from a few years ago, wanting to look at one thing, and then I end up just looking at every other article or little snippet of news. So yeah, is there any chance of us starting the second half any better? No. Port Vale make it 2-0 quite early on when Martin Foyle scores for them. There's claims of offside from us, but it's a bit desperate, really. He's probably not offside. Then it goes 3-0. A player called Robin van der Laan, who not a name I was familiar with, but he's gone and let fly from the edge of the box, and it's sailed in. And there you go. An hour gone. We're 3-0 down to Port Vale. It is not looking good, lads.
Yeah. He was the inspiration with the chorus behind the song Black Betty, wasn't he? Van der Laan.
Oh, very good.
Hey.
Very good. Did you used to listen to that on your crackling transistor radio there, Chris, by any chance? Or have you got that one on vinyl or something?
I mean, Sony Walkman back in the day.
Yes, of course. Right, where was I? Yes, we're an hour played. We're 3-0 down. Everything around the club is just miserable at the moment. But fair play to Sunderland. This is a day where we actually fight back. Very soon after going 3-0 down, and I think this is crucial, isn't it? When you're losing, you want to get a goal back straight away, because the longer it goes without you scoring, the harder it is to build any momentum. We break down the right-hand side of the pitch. Peter Beagrie, who I think you've said, Martin, you really enjoyed Peter Beagrie, didn't you?
I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic player.
Well, this was either his last game for us or his penultimate game for us before his loan expired. He's broke down the right. He's played the ball inside to Gordon Armstrong. You think he's going to score, but his shot actually bounces off the base of the post. And there's Kieron Brady back in the team. Like you said there, might not have even been expected to play were it not for Hauser. And he's able to just prod it in and get us to 3-1. And suddenly, how many times do you see this? A team, despite all of their problems, now looks like prime Brazil. They're flying. There's a Beagrie corner. It gets half cleared. Gary Hours pounces on it, hits a shot from the edge of the area. You've now got all of the luck going for you. In the past, that would have been charged down and cleared away. But what it actually does, this shot from Hours, it deflects off Kevin Ball, who knows nothing about it, but it wrong foots the keeper. And there we are. We're now only behind by a goal. We keep going at them. Where are we here? Yeah, the equaliser comes with about 20 minutes to go. It's not a brilliant finish by Brady, but the ball comes into the box and he kind of scuffs it. But in a way that works because the ball bounces in off the ground and kind of catches the Port Vale goalkeeper off guard. Do you know what I mean? One of those where you hit it so badly it actually works in your favour. So there we go. We're back 3-3. And if anybody's going to win this game at the end, it's Sunderland. Brady goes quite close in the final minutes to getting a hat-trick. And when I look back on the reports of this game, it's all suggesting that, it's a horrific miss by Brady and he's blown our chance to win the game. But I've seen footage back of it. I think that's a little bit harsh. He's got a shot on goal, but there's the goalkeeper on the line and a defender. So I think he's trying to guide the ball away from them two. Even though he's from close range, he still misses the target. But it's one of them where I maybe think it's a bit easier. It's a bit easier when you're watching the game in the stands to say, oh, he should have buried it. But, nevertheless, we've stopped the rot. And I think when you're 3 goals behind after an hour, lads, I don't know, would we all agree that still feels a bit like a win? Is that fair to say?
Well, you'd certainly have took it after conceding the 2 goals after half-time, wouldn't you? You took a point at that point, so
yeah,
it certainly wasn't a bad one. And it's interesting with Beagrie, I think he played the next game. We played at home to Bristol Rovers. He played in that game. That was his final game of his loan spell. That was also John Burns' debut. So Dennis Smith was kind of trying to get this new team together. We just secured Burns' signing. I think that was the game Brady started. Obviously, kept his place after scoring 2 goals in this game as well. So you're kind of looking at that game. You got Brady on one wing, Beagrie on another, John Byrne up front. We actually could do something here. And of course, Bristol Rovers scored an early goal, and you struggle to a 1-1 draw. I think from memory.
This is the confusing thing about that team, because we've seen in this game the 2 extremes of Sunderland. They've gone 3-0 down, and let's just say as well, Port Vale were not a particularly good side. They were mid-table at the time, and they ended up finishing the season being relegated. So we're really struggling against them at one stage, and you're thinking, how have we got ourselves into this mess? And yet, by the end of the game, we're going away thinking, well, we could have nicked a win. So there is that confusion around this time. In terms of Port Vale, we play them at home in the league later on in the season. It's a 1-1 draw, where again, Port Vale have gone ahead through Martin Foyle, who'd scored in the previous game. Gordon Armstrong equalises for us on that day. But I think when you talk about that season and you talk about Port Vale, the game that probably springs to mind is in between the 2 league fixtures. We played them at the start of our cup run, and we won that game quite comfortably. Couple of just other points I'll finish on. The same day, as I say, when I start doing the research, I then get sidetracked. The same day, apparently, the Mags were at home to Oxford United, who included our podcast favourite, Andy Melville. I mean, I think we're up to 3 mentions of him in this pod now alone. He often gets a name check. The Mags at home that day, they only had an attendance of 16,000. So that was quite interesting. That might be one you want to keep in your back pocket next time somebody pipes up about their loyal support. And the other aside, I did promise you some more Marco Gabbiadini content. I am not going to let this slide easily. The sale of Marco Gabbiadini still pains me to this day. And this quote has just infuriated me even more. In that Sports Echo there that I keep referring to, there's a couple of quotes from Crystal Palace manager Steve Coppell, who says, "I don't really know a great deal about Marco, to be absolutely honest. He's not one of those signings where we have really been able to get under the skin of the player and find out all about him." So we've always looked at Marco going to Crystal Palace, and he didn't do very well there. And you think, oh, what's happened there? You've got the manager who's just signed him admitting that they didn't know much about Gabbiadini. Those quotes that I touch upon there, he goes on to say as well that Gabbiadini was just a name on a list of 3 or 4 exciting players they had. They had the Ian Wright money burning a hole in their pocket, and they thought, well, we'll just plump for one on this list. Now, I thought a couple of weeks ago when I was crying to you lads about selling Marco Gabbiadini, I thought I was nearly getting over it. But this has just opened up wounds. To see that the Crystal Palace didn't even want him that much, and they still come and stole him away from us. So I'm sorry, lads. And I think next time I do a deep dive, I'll be avoiding 1991 because it's all very disturbing for me still.
Well, just very quickly, because you mentioned that Newcastle game, Andrew, that came soon after the 1-1 draw. Liam O'Brien, I think. Was it Liam O'Brien who equalised?
Yes,
from
we
top of my
played
head.
them as well. Yeah.
Yep. But so that was a few weeks later. But actually, there was no bigger crowd at Roker Park after that game. That was 29,224, and until it got knocked down, that crowd was never beaten.
Yeah, right.
There
you go.
Well, it makes sense because throughout that decade, we kept kind of shaving off the capacity for various health and safety reasons, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, it says a lot that for the Chelsea quarter-final, there was just over 26,000 there. So it was almost 3,000 more for the Newcastle game at the start of the season.
Aye.
That lad Martin Foyle, who you mentioned as well, he was a gritty player, wasn't he? I always sort of liked him. It was always a battle when you played against him, wasn't it?
I'm waiting for the Foyle-related one-liner, unless I've missed it completely.
What's the trick here?
It was Foyle's war.
Well, Martin Foyle had nearly wrapped it up, I guess. There you go.
Right, I'm done, lads. Let's finish this now.
You're not quite done. I'm just going to join a couple of dots from last week or the week before to this week, right? So you talked about Marco Gabbiadini, our favourite topic of conversation, and we talked after he'd left Palace, went to Derby, and then he played against us and scored against us in the 95-96 season when Peter Reid won promotion with us. Derby finished second. Marco, I think, was top scorer for Derby's team then and went up to the top flight Premier League with us at that point. Centre midfield for that Derby team was Robin van der Laan, who scored for Port Vale on that day.
Never.
So van der Laan had a good few years at Port Vale, went to Derby and was pivotal in them getting promoted that season and played a few games for them, I think, in the top flight. And I think he went maybe to Barnsley or something like that afterwards. But yeah, he stuck around for a while. But yeah, he was in that same team at Derby as Marco Gabbiadini was.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Does that make him Black Betty Van der Ram?
Van der Ram. Excellent. Right.
Come on.
I think on that note, Andrew is going to leave us with a quiz that you'd all ponder on before we leave you alone for this week.
Yes, rather boring, I'm afraid, after this week's episode. I would like to be ending on a high, but this is quite a straightforward question. We will be doing week 20 to the 26th of October, I believe. Now, on the 22nd of October, 1983, in a home game with Manchester United, something happened for the first time in a Sunderland game. So what was that? please.
That's one to ponder on during the week. I'm not sure. I can't immediately think of that
Yeah,
one. We'll have to...
I can see you all furrowing your brows and scratching your chins. It's when we come to it, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It'll all make sense this time next week.
Excellent. So that just leaves me to say thank you to Chris, thank you to Andrew, and thank you to Music Hall star Marie Lloyd for joining us this week, and thank you to everybody for listening. We'll be back next Monday with another episode of On This Week, and of course we'll have a new podcast every day as we look ahead to our game against Wolves at the weekend. Also remember to check out rokerreport.sbnation.com for all sorts of Sunderland content, including your regular On This Day articles. But until we meet again, it is goodbye from us.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Sports Social Podcast Network, the biggest voices in sport. Let's take a look at some of the lineup, tops and tails.
And he goes, "All right, mate, do you want the darts?" And thing, and I'm like, what darts?
The Anfield Wrap.
Off the field, Liverpool have done everything they possibly could to achieve dominance now.
The Analyst Inside Cricket.
It was announced over the PA system that I was out of the test for injury. A massive cheer went up around the ground. Probably the biggest cheer I've got in the UK.
All on Europe's biggest sport podcast network. Find your next favourite sport podcast. Search Sports Social Podcast Network and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Verified comparison at content.sport-social.co.uk/comparison.